A bad reveal can permanently change how a game is remembered.
So you,
ごめんなさい。
looks like we're having a little interference here.
誰かワイヤレスを使ってますか？
Somebody out there using wireless? Anybody? Everything went really well in our rehearsals. You guys need to turn off all your wireless devices.
Oh, what? Was it 80, 80, 90? Whoa!
Don't worry, having a break, don't worry, having a break, don't have to break, don't worry, having a break, having a break.
What is going on out there?
Hi everyone, I'm A-Nash, and first impressions are everything. From making friends, to job interviews, to even starting a YouTube channel. Though, what I'd like to talk about today is the first impressions from video game reveals. A game's reveal is so important because that's what initially drives the conversation around that game up until launch. Even a bad game can be masked with a good-looking reveal. Something that can mislead enough consumers into pre-ordering the game before the truth inevitably comes out. However, I feel like the opposite of this is not discussed enough. There have been many cases of good games that for one reason or another just did not seem to have a good first impression. So please allow me a little bit of your time to go over some of the examples of the different kinds of bad reveals that these good games have gotten. Now this first type of bad reveal is a classic that has become rare in our now post-E3 world. Do you remember E3? I remember always wanting to go and try out all the new games shown early. Ew, not that one! Seeing Sonic Boom again all these years later is making me feel really old. Anyways, but of course by the time I became an adult, E3 just had to have died already. But maybe that was for the best. So, along with revealing the games, many of these presentations involved showing them being played live in front of an audience. This was especially important for Wii and Kinect games, so you could see how a player would interact with the game's motion controls. But sometimes, the game just didn't work. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is infamous for its motion controls, but I still believe the game turned out pretty good. However, at E3 2010, the game's controls at times looked broken. The failure to control the game on stage was blamed on wireless interference. It wasn't really Nintendo's fault, from what I can tell. Even the press that got to try out Skyward Sword at E3 after the show said the game controlled fine. However, for most gamers, they only saw what was shown on stage, and what they saw was Miyamoto failing to control the game. Which is me basically trying to play with the motion controls in the HD version of the game since the Switch doesn't have a sensor bar. These kinds of on-stage fails weren't just limited to motion-based games though. Like even Uncharted 4, a great PlayStation game, had connection problems on stage, leading to a pretty awkward moment of Nathan Drake just not moving. But at least Naughty Dog made best of the situation and added in a joke achievement into the final game, which reminds me of this Easter egg in Sonic Mania that calls back to the on-stage fails of its reveal event, where there was this loud buzzing noise. Anyways, next up is... So these two were originally going to be two different sections of this video, but these two different kind of fails go hand in hand, with hiding too much leading to misunderstandings. First of all, the original Metroid Prime. Now this one really surprised me when I first learned about it because I didn't grow up when this game was coming out. So it surprised me to learn that this game did not have a good first impression. When the game was originally revealed back in 2001, gamers thought that the game looked too much like a generic first-person shooter, and they were worried about the Metroid aspects of the game being missing. It wasn't until closer to release, and once they saw more and the game actually came out, that it became obvious that The Metroid was there, in fact, and in my opinion, this is one of the best games of all time. It also helped that Metroid Fusion, a 2D Metroid game, released on the exact same day, just to, to prove the point to everyone that the classic Metroid wasn't going anywhere. Well, actually, we didn't get the next mainline Metroid game until like over a decade later, but that's besides the point. And another game that was initially misunderstood was, oh my god, are you kidding me? Another Zelda game in this video? I swear, this is going to be the last time. So yeah, the Zelda Windwaker was initially misunderstood for its cartoony art style, and that was because at the time, gamers, what they were expecting, what they wanted, was a more realistic, darker approach that they saw in the original GameCube tech demo. That was what they were expecting. So when they didn't get what they expected, it led to what I would personally consider an unfair initial judgment of the game. And personally, I believe that the art style in Wind Waker has aged much better than what you see visually and what was the direct response to this initial fan feedback in Zelda Twilight Princess. Sorry, Matt, but the Wind Waker is timeless. Anyways, I have one more game that I would like to talk about in this section that actually inspired me to make this video. And that game is one so new, so recent, that it's not even out at the time of me recording this. And that is Pokemon Pokopia. I personally believe that this game's initial reveal trailer hid too much of the game's overall scope. It led to us that watched the initial reveal of it thinking that it was going to be much more limited and smaller than we originally thought. So when we saw that $70 price, it was shocking. But after a little while, we got to hear of some previews of the game from people that got to play it early. And you know what? Maybe the underwhelming trailer actually helped in this regard because it led to some pleasantly surprising feedback. But we'll just have to wait and see on this one to see how it turns out, as the game isn't even out yet, so who knows, it could be a Switch 2 system seller, as it is pretty similar to Animal Crossing and that kind of cozy game genre that can sell tens of millions, or it could be a keycard flop. So we've now made it to the last but certainly not least of these, games that were tied down by a bad system launch. Now there is so much that I will not be unpacking today because failed console launches is just a whole nother huge topic on its own. When I think of a bad console launch though, the first that comes to mind to me personally is the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn actually had a good amount of decent launch titles. It had Panzer Dragoon, Clockwork Knight, and Daytona USA. However, of course, we all know about the infamous rushed launch of the system in the United States, with the system just being shadow dropped to stores, and it costing $100 more than the PlayStation price, which was announced right after. And of course, there was the Virtual Boy. And now that I've gotten to actually play the Virtual Boy games in the way that they were originally intended, I can say that there were multiple good games on the Virtual Boy. Good games, as in plural. Yeah, and looking back at the ratings of the time and the reviews of the games, it wasn't really the quality of the actual games that was the problem. It was the system that these games were tied down to. For me personally, the worst part of the Virtual Boy is the comfort of it, which there is no comfort with playing on a Virtual Boy. Yeah, so the last game that I would want to bring up today is a game that was one of my favorites of this past year, but the conversation was just horrible around it online, and that was Mario Kart World. So, the Nintendo Switch 2, I can't really say it had a bad launch because the sales have been great. They've been breaking records. We'll have to see how things go along over time. We're still very early, and we have to see how general audiences, mass consumers take it compared to just diehard Nintendo fans like me that will spend $100 on a Virtual Boy replica. So the whole reason I want to bring up Mario Kart World is because when the game was announced, when the game was revealed in the April Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, the game looked pretty good, and we all assumed it was going to be $60, maybe $70, you know, but $80. Everyone, we looked online, it was $80, some were saying $90, and that just completely soured all the conversation around the game. And I honestly think if it wasn't for the game being bundled in with the system, we could have had possibly a disastrous launch, but Nintendo, they knew what they were doing by bundling in the game with the system for that $500 bundle where you get the $30 discount on the game. So it's basically just a artificially manufactured deal to make it look like a better value, of course. But yeah, so that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching, and good night.